everyone, and welcome to the Minneapolis conversation on board diversity for 2020 Women on Boards. I'm Ursula Minchis, and together with Wendy Porter, we are proud to co-chair the very first Minneapolis event for 2020 Women on Boards. We are thrilled to have you join us today for this very important conversation. Wendy and I are both entrepreneurs here in the Twin Cities. I'm the founder of Sales Coach Now, a sales training and coaching company, and Wendy comes out of big corporate. In 2015, Wendy launched an award-winning experiential events management agency called Wendy Porter Events. She and her team have worked on some of the highest profile events in the country, and I am super grateful to be working so closely with her. Hello, Wendy.
Hey, Ursula, nice to meet you today. And hello, everyone out there. Welcome. What Ursula didn't tell you is that she is also an award-winning author and keynote speaker. And she was the president of NABO California, along with Betsy Berkemer-Cordair, our fearless CEO of the 2020 Women on Boards, who we will be introducing in a moment. Before we begin the conversation today, we'd like to cover two housekeeping items. First, please say hi in the chat and let others know that you are here. And secondly, there are two parts and two Zoom links for our event today. The first link brought you into this webinar. And at the end of the webinar, we will ask you to exit and click back on the second link for the breakout and networking portion, where you will meet with your director coaches and have an opportunity to get all of your questions answered, as well as participate in a powerful networking session. You won't want to miss it.
So let's get started. We want to actually begin by introducing you to the CEO of 2020 Women on Boards, Betsy Berkemer-Cordair. Betsy and I go way back to my days in California, where we both served on the NABO California board. Betsy is the CEO of 2020 Women on Boards and owns Berkemer Clayton Inc., a retained executive firm. For 6 years, she has also served as co-chair of the Los Angeles 2020 Women on Boards conversation on board diversity with Renee Frazier. Betsy is also the author of The Board Game, How Smart Women Become Corporate Directors, and Winning the Board Game, How Women Directors Make the Difference. Welcome, Betsy. We're so excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Ursula and Wendy. What a pleasure. I'm here in sunny Los Angeles. I know it's a little cooler there in Minneapolis, but we promise we're going to warm it up today, and delighted that all of you are with us. Yes, I'm the CEO of 2020 Women on Boards and very proud of what we've been able to do this year. As most of you probably know, 2020 Women on Boards is the leading campaign to educate and do research following and tracking women on boards in the Russell 3000 companies. We also collaborate with companies, and we advocate in a public service and public information campaign to advance more women to corporate boards. And many of you in this audience are already on your way. So this year, because of this virtual environment that we're in, we've been able to do 28 events in cities, 24 US cities and 4 countries, the UK, Zurich, Spain 2 days ago, and Mexico City yesterday. And we've had quite a run, I must say. And we're delighted to be here in Minneapolis for the first time. And I want to thank Ursula and Wendy and the committee for putting on the inaugural event, the first of many in years to come here in Minneapolis. So we've had 6,000 registrants for our 28 events. We're very proud of that. That's more than ever. And we kicked off the whole series with a global broadcast, our first ever, which was on November 12th. Some of you might have seen it. Melinda Gates, Melody Hobson, Valerie Jarrett, and the Royal Bank of Canada were featured, and it's just been a great, great run. So also wanted to mention that what timing, probably because we're doing our series right now, but NASDAQ came out with an announcement yesterday that they've proposed to the SEC that all of their member companies and other public companies have at least one woman and one minority or LGBTQ person on their boards, both a woman and a minority person. And this is great news for all of us, and to have a big 800-pound gorilla, as I say, like NASDAQ, adopting what we've been working on for 10 years is phenomenal. And a little bit later, we're going to let you know what's going to happen for the next 10 years. And I'd like to give a special shout out to our founders, our co-founders, Mally Giro and Stephanie Sonnabend, who are here with us today, and without whose vision and hard work we couldn't be here today. And they're going to be director coaches in the sessions following the panel. So Wendy and Ursula, thanks very much. We are delighted to be here on our 10th anniversary and of course the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote. And we're so pleased to be here in Minneapolis.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that overview, Betsy. We'll see you again shortly.
Definitely.
So as Ursula and I were learning more about 2020 Women on Boards, one of the things that we found to be really impressive is the research that the organization has done over the years, tracking the statistics of women on corporate boards of companies in the Russell 3000. Since many of you are new to the campaign here in Minnesota, we wanted to show you some of the history about where we stand. So Ursula is going to fill us in on that.
Thank you, Wendy. I would love to. In 2011, when the stats started to be tracked, the percentage of women on the Russell 3000 companies, which are the largest publicly traded companies in the US, was 10.6% and had not changed significantly in the past decade. We feature this information in our Gender Diversity Index and Database, which is published on the 2020 Women on Boards website. Since we started the campaign, the percentage of women in the Russell 3000 has steadily increased in the past 4 years, going from 16% nationally to 22.6% women on the Russell 3000 boards in 2020. We achieved our goal of 20% in 2019. At the same time, the percentage of women on boards in the Russell 3000 companies headquartered in Minnesota has increased from 21.4% to 27.4% in the same 4 years, 2017 through 2020. Woohoo, Minnesota is doing great so far. Among the 25 states in the US that have more than 20 companies on the Russell 3000, all but 2, Florida and Utah, exceed the 20% goal for women on their boards this year. The states that achieved more than 20% for the first time are Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Texas. There are 48 companies on the Russell 3000 headquartered in Minnesota, and 36 or 75% are what we call winning companies at 20% or greater women on their boards. That's a total of 117 women on Russell 3000 company boards headquartered here in Minnesota. Imagine for a moment, imagine all Minnesota companies on the Russell 3000 for a moment. We are really, really close to having all of them at 20% or greater. All that is needed is between 12 to 16 women, depending on whether they add a seat or retire a man. That's it, 12 to 16. There are easily that many qualified women currently attending this event right now. The stats from Minnesota are really exciting, and we're eager to watch them continue to increase in the upcoming years. So now I'm going to hand it back to Wendy to introduce our VIP keynote panel conversation today, entitled Women Leaders During Times of Crisis. As you all know, Minnesota has been in a unique position in 2020, not only as one of the worst hit states for the COVID-19 pandemic, but also as the epicenter for the civil unrest happening all over the US this year. Wendy?
Thanks, Ursula. So today we will hear from an amazing panel moderated by Kevin Wright, who has been an unwavering supporter of our work here in Minneapolis. When I asked Kevin to moderate our panel, he accepted without a moment's hesitation. Now, before I hand it over to Kevin, let me share a little bit of his background. Kevin D. Wright is the managing partner and CEO of Eris Insights Group, a leadership training and diversity and inclusion consultancy. With more than 20 years of leadership experience, Kevin capitalizes on his experience spearheading organizational change in unpopular businesses that serve corporate, industry association, and higher education clients in the areas of leadership, strategic management, and diversity and inclusion. Kevin serves on multiple boards and advisory boards, including Sigma Pi Phi, Beta Mu Boule Foundation Board, National Black MBA National Advisory Board, North Point Health and Wellness Board of Directors, and he also serves on the Sunrise Bank's Advisory Board. Thank you for joining our conversation today, Kevin, and over to you to introduce today's panelists.
Thank you, Wendy. Perfect. Good morning, and good morning to everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. I'm honored today to be part of this inaugural conversation, especially honored to join such an esteemed panel here today. And so without any further ado, as we get ready for our conversation, I'd like to invite our first panelist, Dawn Owens. Dawn, will you join me?
Hi.
Good morning, Dawn. Dawn is the Chief Executive Officer of Triple Tree Holdings, a healthcare investment bank and principal investor. Dawn leverages 25 plus years of healthcare experience, including CEO of Optum Health, to advise and invest in innovative and high growth healthcare technology and services businesses. Dawn serves on multiple corporate boards and not-for-profit boards. Let's welcome Dawn. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's bring our next panelist on, and that's Susan Morisato. Susan, good morning. Susan is the former president of Insurance Solutions at United Healthcare, where she led the largest Medicare supplement business in the country, generating $12 billion in annual revenue. She's an expert in the Medicare space from a payer and consumer perspective and is passionate about serving that population. Susan's also served on nonprofit boards and advisory boards, including chair of LIMRA International, a financial services trade association, and currently serves on the University of Illinois Actuarial Science Board and LAS Alumni Council. Good morning, Susan.
Morning.
Welcome. Next, I'd like to invite Sherry Edison. Good morning, Sherry. Will you join us?
Good morning.
Good morning. Sherry's an executive vice president and general counsel at Amcor PLC, a global leader in the development and production of responsible packaging for food, beverage, pharmaceutical, medical, home, and personal care and other products. At Amcor, her responsibilities include corporate governance, global compliance, legal operations for 240 sites across more than 40 countries. Sherry's pretty busy, I see. Sherry currently serves on the boards of American Family Insurance and Cardinal Health, and on the board of visitors at the University of Wisconsin Weissman Center. And last but not least, let's bring on Allie Wing.
Good morning.
Good morning, Allie. Recognized among Women's Inc. Top 100 board of directors in 2019, Allie Wing is an independent director helping boards with innovation, transformation, and growth in a rapidly changing world. That's an understatement in 2020 for sure. Allie currently serves on the boards of Casey General Stores, Christopher and Banks, and Worldwide Orphans. Previously, Allie served as a director of Bazaar Voice until it was sold to Marlin Equity in early 2018. Join me, everyone, in welcoming our esteemed panel. Good morning. And take a second to say hello in the chat, just so that we're aware of who's here. And as we said in the beginning, this is a conversation. And so we won't have a whole lot of call and response. I'm hoping that we have a conversation today and that our guests walk away far more knowledgeable than when they joined us. And so I'd like to start off the questions with one that goes around the room here. And there's no way to apply for a corporate board seat. Board positions are not published. They're held pretty closely and confidentially by the existing boards of directors. And so my first question, with that being the case, I'd like to go around the room, and we'll start with Dawn. I'd like to know, what was your pathway to your corporate board seat? Who recommended you?
Thanks, Kevin. You know, I think as we think about being on boards and the pathway that we have, I think it starts way before we ever get on our first board. It's about what are the accumulation of experiences, relationships, and ways in which we're participating in the marketplace that come together and start to align around a goal and frankly, a vision for yourself as a leader, that you can be an additive member and participant in a board. And so I've been fortunate throughout my career to have people who have invested in me and frankly had the conversation with me about what were my goals, what were my aspirations, and being on a board was one of them. And so for all of you in the audience, I'd say initiate that conversation, whether as a manager or as a person desiring of being on boards. Secondly, I had the great fortune with a 15-year career at United Health Group and running one of the businesses, Optum Health, as CEO, which really gave me a position where I was able to navigate and interface with many different types of companies and have a vast amount of experience that was relevant to companies at various stages of development. And so I was fortunate in that I was on boards as a part of my role within United Health Group, which gave me invaluable experience, albeit in a different kind of context than in a public company context, which then allowed me to parlay that into corporate board service when I left United Health Group and took on other roles and responsibilities. So I would say it's networking, it's making your desire known and really recognizing it in you, recognizing what you bring to the table and why you might be someone who can contribute to boards. And for me, because I am a part of a firm that invests in private companies, I probably have an abundance of riches because I probably have more board service opportunities than I can appropriately take on. Because I also would say to everybody, what is most valuable in a board context today is active board service. It's not just showing up for meetings and listening and asking a few questions. It's really being actively engaged with the company, thinking about them and supporting the management in ways that are valuable to them based upon the skills and orientation that you bring into that environment.
Thank you, Dawn. And I will loop back because there were quite a few nuggets in that, you know, being in a relationship with someone that actually invests in companies may very well be a great avenue for identifying boards and having a person like yourself identify other women to be able to be on the radar for boards. And so why don't we go to you, Susan, and tell us, what was your pathway to the boards that you find yourself on?
So thanks, Kevin. I'm probably the unicorn in this group, as Kevin may have noted in my introduction. I am the only one of this panel that is currently not serving on a corporate public board. I have nonprofit experience, as well as I mentioned financial services, trade association experience. And so for me, this journey came a little bit later in my career. So for all of you who are aspiring to be on your first board, you know, this is advice that I would give that I, in some ways, wish someone had told me 10 years ago, and that is to start very early and to really make your wishes known and make it an active part of your development plan. Now, in many respects, I was still fortunate. I have been on different kinds of nonprofit boards. Kevin mentioned the LIMRA International, which is a financial services trade organization. And it was a pretty formal board, even though it wasn't a public company. And because I'm an actuary by training, I have some very natural financial acumen, which actually turns out to be quite valuable in a number of boards, nonprofit and otherwise. So when I was at LIMRA International, one of my first jobs as treasurer and chair of the Comp and Benefits Committee was to take that organization through a pension benefit termination for their employees. And this was an organization that had decades of experienced employees who counted on being able to have that pension when they retired. In fact, took reduced compensation in kind for this pension, and they could no longer afford to do that with the investment rates changing. And so I worked with the CEO to find a way to alleviate some of the financial burden, but really be compassionate around those employees that gave, you know, practically their life's earnings or life experience to this organization. When I was at the Minnesota Zoo, which was purely an effort for me to be part of the active part of the Minneapolis community when I came to United Healthcare, I happened to join at the same time that they were initiating their very first major capital raising campaign. And they were looking at 5-year pledges from board members and others. And I came in as treasurer of the foundation board and found they had no cash flow model. They had no way to determine how they would change the view of income versus cash flow, because if someone gives a 5-year pledge, they don't get all that money up front. And so their understanding of how that works, their understanding of what happens if someone defaults on their pledge, how they can actually book that was totally not within the purview of what they did. So even though these were nonprofit organizations, there was some really important work that I was fortunate to be part of that I think really helped me understand what it would take to do this in a private company setting or a corporate board setting, as well as running a very large business within United Healthcare. So, but it is also now I am learning about networking. So while I am very comfortable in the accomplishments that I've made in my professional life, it is tougher to be on that list of somebody who's in this, as you say, Kevin, confidential board search of saying, who do you know who is? And if you're not networking to get on that short list of people's top of mind, it's likely not going to happen. In fact, I'm an active candidate right now for a board. And I found that I got on that list because one of the board members had a connection with United Healthcare and therefore knew me. And so it is all about that connection. And so that would be, one of my big takeaways, and to start early and to also understand how what you did professionally and the accomplishments that you have relates to the skills that are important to someone who wants to do board service. That translation doesn't necessarily come naturally, and you have to really understand, what you can uniquely bring to the table.
That's the second time. Thank you, Susan. That's the second time we heard how important relationships are. Something tells me that's going to be a recurring and common theme that runs through our conversation. Why don't we go over to Sherry and ask Sherry the very same question. What's your pathway to the board and who recommended you?
Well, I think I'd like to start by putting a fine point on the concepts that Don and Susan have just reinforced throughout their comments, which is networking and how you approach that. And in my case, particularly as a lawyer wanting to get on boards, I found really talking to people far and wide about my interest in board service, really driving those discussions with pure curiosity about how they got on a board, really talking to them about their background and helping those conversations to inform how I described my background, really letting people know about my interests. And then I coupled that with trying to make sure that I was attending activities and events where I could rub shoulders with like-minded individuals who were either already on boards or were at the same position that I was, wanting to get on a board. And that really helped to fuel, I think, the whole notion of making sure that people were aware of my interests. But something that Susan mentioned is also very important, that you couple that with continuing to do a good job in whatever position you're currently in, because you never know who's watching. And when people are taking note of you being very good at your craft, plus they've heard through the grapevine in some form or fashion that you're interested in board service, it certainly helps to further position you for those opportunities when they arise. One other thing that Don said that I think is really, really an important avenue for getting the word out about your interest is having the conversation with your employer. Again, as a lawyer, oftentimes discussions about board service weren't necessarily thought of as a career development component for me. And so really being forthright in my interest and really having those conversations where my employer could see how board service could help me to further develop and in fact, enhance my role as a general counsel and corporate secretary also made a difference in terms of just broadening that net of awareness of my interest in board service.
Thank you, Sherry.
So Kevin, can I just call an audible here? Because I think that, one of the things I would encourage employers to do off of Sherry's comment here is, I don't think it is clear all the time, especially when you're in large corporate America, that you have permission to actually pursue external board service. You spend so much time and focus on your core job. You don't pick your head up and look at the broader universe. And I would say that the enrichment that happens not only for the company that you're serving, but for the individual and what they can then give back into the organization that they are a part of is so invaluable. So I would challenge the companies in the Twin Cities who are participating on this conference to really think about, what is my role in supporting professionals, professional women who have the qualifications and may not even know it, but desires to serve on boards, corporate boards, and how do I support their pathway? Because it's a two-way street, it's a three-way street. It's the individual, it's the corporate board you'd be joining, but it's also your employer if you're not, retired and doing board service. So sorry for the audible, but I thought it was a really important point to draw out for all of the participants on the phone.
I think it was perfect. And as a former D1 athlete, I think that was a great audible to call.
Thanks.
And
without any ado, let's go to Allie and hear from Allie. Allie, what was your
and I'll add on Dan's comment, because I can't reinforce it enough either before I tell you sort of my path. But I also think in this world where there is a changing understanding of the skills we need on boards, what makes a great board, there's a new doorway open in that conversation. There are also starting to be programs like the New York Stock Exchange is now actually asking companies to put their money where their mouth is, exactly what Dawn just said. And companies can actually offer up talent within their organization as potential board mentees and then receive one on their board. And that's a brand new program that didn't exist 6 months ago. And it's these conversations and this mandate to ask companies to actually create the activation, not just for women, not just for diverse candidates, but in general, thinking about how we do that as development. And I think there's really unique programs starting to emerge. So I think putting an onus on the company's role in this is a really important one.
I think you're right. And NASDAQ maybe recognizes that, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So my path, I will just share anecdotally, it underscores everything my esteemed colleagues have already said, which is it doesn't start when you're looking for a board role. It starts a lot earlier than that. So it's how you show up and what you do. And I will share with you, because I always get asked this question, it's so hard to get the first board role. It actually came not with me looking for a board role, but it came from a vendor of mine in how I showed up with their work over many, many years. And I had many discussions with that part of my network about my aspirations and interests. I don't know that I'd actually ever said specifically board, but it came out of how I interacted with them. And they were going through a skills matrix assessment, looking to add sort of a consumer digital part of their board in this software technology company. So it's a reminder and an underscore to what you've already heard, which is it starts early and it starts in how you are as an operator and managing your own professional career. I would add one additional point now that I've been on multiple boards and I think about that is, and it's kind of sort of my challenge to the audience. I often hear women looking for board advice come to me and say, I'm looking to be a board candidate. And I ask them, what do you bring to a board? And honestly, that's really not a very developed answer. And you wouldn't approach a job that way. You don't say, I'm looking for a new company. You are looking for a new role based on your skills and where you add value. And I think there are great resources that I'm frankly a lot more savvy on today, having served on multiple boards. So it's my offer of advice is every public company has to be out with their skills matrix. They are disclosing what are the skills they think are most important to have covered on their board. They're also disclosing how covered they are in those different skills. There is great education and fodder in that for you to go see what are the different ways we're getting at board skills. How deeply covered are they? How common are they across boards, so that when you're actually out looking for a board role, you're in a position to speak more specifically to what makes a great board match for you and where do you bring the biggest value, because that's where you're going to have your most success in networking.
Thank you, Allie. You guys really make this hard for me. I started this with a few questions to begin with, and Lord knows my brain is going a mile a minute, just trying to keep up with you. The one thing that I heard recurring was certainly relationship, and networking. And so my next question, my follow-on question really is in that area of networking and relationship. I think it was Sherry who said how to approach networking. I think we all know sometimes that's an awkward proposition. So I'd like to understand, beyond just the traditional networking opportunities, what way of sort of non-traditional networking opportunities would you suggest for people that have an interest in board service? And that question is for anyone. I won't call out anyone. I will if you don't answer me though.
I can start. One of the things that I do a lot more of today than I did, again, when I was in large corporate America, was actively engage and participate in industry conferences. I happen to be focused in the healthcare industry. There are a number of very large conferences in healthcare where not only healthcare companies come to find out about what's going on, but other interested parties that are active in healthcare. So investors, board members, et cetera. And so I was a person who really thought networking was a dirty word. It kind of felt skeevy to me. I didn't like it, didn't like doing it, didn't like putting myself out there, even though I am a pretty extroverted person. But what I have really grown to appreciate is the value of meeting and engaging with people in my industry and asking questions about their business, asking questions about their need, asking questions and learning. So if I were to do it over again and I were to start this journey, and I'm going to focus on the private company space because that's the world I spend a lot of time in today. At these conferences, you have financial sponsors who are investors in all of these thousands, and I mean thousands of private companies that are at a stage where they have boards, they have businesses, and they need outside directors. And those outside directors play a disproportionate role in supporting the company. It's not dissimilar to what Susan described as far as the Minnesota Zoo, around just bringing a skill set and a background to that company at a moment in time when they're scaling, when they're growing, et cetera. And so it's a great way to network with people who have tremendous visibility to opportunities, who have control over those opportunities, and where you can learn about them and put your interests out there through that networking within those industry conferences. So that's something that I have in general been much more intentional about because I think it is such a wonderful way to broaden your perspective on the marketplace, and certainly can be additive as it relates to board service.
Kevin, I'd like to really build on that because I think it combines a couple of other really important things. And I'm actually pleased to understand that, as Don suggests, that I'm nodding furiously because I think there's another thing. I have spent also most of my career in healthcare, and I love the topic. It's so sweeping, it's so complicated, but it's changing, and technology is changing it. This pandemic has changed it, and the healthcare system has to transform. And so I think the other aspect of board service, at least for me, but I think it's true for everybody, but at least for me, will be something that I am passionate about, something that I get energized and inspired by, because it's not just a job. You're just not killing time. You're trying to help the company. You're trying to become a better individual. And because I'm so steeped in healthcare, I also, in the last couple of years, have started going to more conferences. And it wasn't explicitly to network, to meet people so that I got myself out there. While that was a goal, it was also to really understand, how is this ecosystem starting to evolve and change? And how do I connect dots of what I know about my own experience, what's going on that's really brand new? How do I get really passionate, energized about what some of the newer companies, particularly the private companies, some of the startup companies are doing that could fundamentally make a difference, and how could I participate in that transformation? And that completely energized me. I've come out of those conferences with all sorts of questions, with context for people. I start trying to connect dots, and even if nothing specifically comes out of that, I just think that whole experience and that whole sort of organic networking is so much more effective and for me fulfilling than just going to a Rolodex and calling people and saying, hey, you know, here I'm doing this, I'm interested in a board, but really engaging myself in how do I get myself into this ecosystem in a way that I haven't engaged before, and how could I really get passion energized about this? So, you know, I think that notion of really doing something that you're really engaged and passionate about is also very important while you're doing all these other things, that they're not independent, mutually exclusive events. They all connect together.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that commentary. And I took the liberty of watching some of the other women on boards across the country. And that was a key point that Deborah Lee, who took part in Detroit's Women on Boards, talked about, doing something that she was passionate about and she loved. And so what I want to do, I don't want to lose sight of that point, because let's face it, being on a corporate board, being on any board is work. And so what I'd like to do, since Sherry sort of teed up the conversation, I want to give Sherry the last comment on how to approach networking. And then I want to go to you, Allie, and I want to hear you talk to me about the work. And let's remember, our conversation's about leading in crisis. And Lord knows boards have had to deal, you know, whether you're talking about ESG or what have you, boards have had to deal with their share of crisis this year. And so let's go to Sherry and hear what you have to say about how you network. And then I'm going to jump right to you, Allie, because I want to know, what is the work that's involved with being on a board? Sherry?
Kevin, the only thing I could add to what Don and Susan have said, and I think they're spot on about really using your source of passion and your area of expertise, if you will, is fertile ground for networking. But the other thing that I have found over the years is that, kind of drawing on that from a different angle, I found that within my legal profession, the more I served on panel discussions and participated in conferences where there were other lawyers focusing in on particular areas of the law, the more I participated, the more I started to expand my own view of my skill set. It started to take on a broader perspective for me, which helped me in terms of looking at myself and saying, these are the reasons why my skill set as a lawyer is transferable as a director in the boardroom. And so I do think that leveraging your own sweet spot and using that as a way to span out, whether it's pure networking or just really starting to grow and reframe your own perception of your skills and abilities, I think is just a perfect starting point to really build on networking.
Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate that. Allie, talk to us a little bit about what's the work involved with being on a board?
Can I make one network plug before I do that?
Absolutely, of course
It'll
you can.
be short, I promise you. I'm going to just share this with everyone because I do think we are in a moment of time that there is a little bit of reason for celebration. There are different tools than there used to be available for women, and we shouldn't be shy to lean into them. I'm just going to share an example. I moved to the Twin Cities a little over 4 years ago, and I'm somebody, unlike the other panelists, who's moved industries multiple times and lived in very different geographies. And in that is always a challenge of building new networks. And some of my most important networks are networks not from who I'm working with, but people that give me a perspective outside of what I'm doing. And there are organizations, which I'm going to give the example of Women's Corporate Directors, which is part of the NACD, which has chapter by city. And I actually approached it initially because I was looking when I moved to a new city to meet some other similarly situated women that were doing similar professional roles in their lives, but different industries. Almost every one of those organizations today has mentee type programs or bring the aspiring next gen. So there are great organizations, I think, showing up now in a lot of different places that do provide some resources that go beyond what I hope you're all taking advantage of. You're here, so you're probably motivated in networking. How do you even lean into some of these new capabilities? I think things like Women's Corporate Directors or NACD are creating a lot of nice opportunities. So I'd encourage you to keep that in mind. The work. I just did 2 days of board meetings. Which
it is work, right?
COVID has not been less meetings, by any level of board activity this year. It's been a lot of more. But I mean, I guess I would say there are 3 themes for me from the work, all of which probably are best cast in. You should definitely pick things you're passionate about, because doing boards is not doing work. If you do it well, you spend time on it. So it would be great if you actually enjoy it. And it would be great to bring those 2 together. But the first is that it's governance, it's not management. And I think I'm somebody who mostly has been a board member as an operating board member, meaning I'm still doing dual roles. And I think Dawn said it earlier. I love the perspective it's given me, because it forces me to sit around different sides of the table. I think I go back a better operator, and vice versa. I come to the governance role better. But it does require an intentionality when you're on the board of remembering that you're not there as an operator. You are there for governance, and that's a very different role. I think the second thing is, and I feel a little bit like a grammar school teacher saying this one, but board work is only as good as you're prepared. And there's a big difference. So believe it or not, it takes time to learn the business, to understand their financial model, to be prepared with the board deck, because the goal isn't to go off and operate. The goal is to be able to ask questions that create probes and inquiry that helps level up the governance of that company. And the only way to do that is to be pretty agile with the business. So it takes time and effort. And then I would say third, just when you think you have a formula, you get a year like 2020. So there are, I know you asked sort of what are standard committees, and I think in the last 5 to 10 years, certainly as somebody who's played a lot of more data or transformation roles, I've been at the heart of where a lot of people are rethinking the right way to do governance, when you need a third party, when you need committees. And then all of that's kind of gone in steroids in 2020, right? Because we thought we were ready for things like digital capability, and then suddenly in 30 days, everything had to be remote. So what I would say is it's like business today. There's a constant set of step change skilling that's going on within boards. And I don't think the curve is slower or less demanding than as an operator, but it's different at a governance level. And that requires time. But I would say those are the big 3. That's helpful.
So, and to build on that commentary, I'd love to hear someone else's perspective around the work, and then maybe even more specifically about what type of work have you encountered as a result of all of the happenings of 2020 that maybe you didn't encounter in the past. So Sherry or Dawn or Susan, lean in for me. Talk to me a little about the work.
You know, my commentary is a little bit of the work varies, not only based upon the company and the industry, but the stage that that company is in. You know, again, I spend a lot of time serving on boards of very established yet still younger companies that are, so it's not a Cardinal Health like Sherry, where it's a very mature company that is looking at how, you know, focus on the things they're focused on. In a younger company, there's a lot of focus around how do I scale my business? How do I grow my business? How do I continue to invest in my business? How do I attract and retain the right workforce, which every company is focused on today. And so as you think about governance, you know, the obvious are, you know, financial compliance, compensation, et cetera. But in 2020, it took on a whole new dimension around, am I going to have enough cash to pay my employees, because my revenue streams have been disrupted because of COVID? And how do I deal with that? How do I understand the federal programs, PPP loans and so forth, and are they appropriate for me? How do I apply for them, et cetera? And what I saw was an environment where boards had to lean in a little bit more to not only ask those great questions that Allie spoke about, but also offer perspective and really help companies kind of keep their ballast in place so that they didn't get tipped over during the midst of a crisis, right? They needed a steady hand. They needed good counsel. They needed to be able to look beyond the crisis and how they wanted to come out of that crisis and what decisions they needed to make. And so I think conversations around communication to your employees, communication to your customers, stabilizing your cash, thinking about if you have to make tough choices, what do those tough choices look like, and so forth, were critical during this last season of time. I'm sure boards, all, at every stage of corporate America today. And I think it goes back to something everybody has said, which is, you bring to those conversations your unique experiences. So Allie, in her subject matter expertise, would be someone they would tap into of how do I transition much more rapidly than I ever expected into a digital way of delivering my products and services. Where somebody else who has more of a finance background might be helping them navigate the idiosyncrasies of loan programs and federal stimulus and so forth. So again, I think it speaks to, it is hard work, it is governance, but during times of crisis, there also is, I would say, probably, again, not management, but engagement that is more intensive than during the typical kind of process associated with boards.
Thank you, Dawn.
Kevin, I think to the point that Don and Allie have both made, when I have thought about the nature of governance in my contributions during this time of crisis, I thought about it in terms of a series of pivots. You're partnering with management to pivot and to respond to the unique circumstances, challenges, and so forth that really apply specifically to your company, your industry, as Don very well described. And so you're looking at strategy as a very fluid process at that point, as you're trying to reassess your strategic objectives in light of the changing backdrop that you're dealing with. You're thinking about human capital in a much more personal way as you're trying to figure out what that means to really take care of your people. You're thinking about business resiliency and business continuity in a very more urgent way to make sure that you're as positioned as well as you can to navigate through the crisis. And so it's a very, very fluid, very important partnership, as Don said, with management and frankly other stakeholders, as you're really trying to figure out how to respond to the challenges and in some instances opportunities that a crisis presents.
Sherry, thank you. I'm certain that our audience picked up the sort of three different perspectives that that Allie and you and Dawn brought in the last commentary, with Dawn being more nimble, more upstarts, maybe later stage investing. So within that, I think our audience needs to also think about maybe whether their board service interest is on the front end of an organization or a newer, younger organization. Do they want to bring more of that subject matter expertise, much like an Allie brings, or do they want that tried and true, long-standing company, such as Cardinal Health, like the board that you're on? Now, I could talk about this forever with you all, to be honest with you, but we're getting close to that bewitching hour. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to go around the room really quickly, I reiterate, really quickly, and ask this one last question. And that one last question before we wrap up is, what would you tell women that aspire to be on boards not to do? What is that one thing to not do or to not say around boards? And let's start with you, Susan.
So I guess the first thing is something I think Allie said earlier, and that is, while there are a lot of opportunities, I think getting really crisp about what it is you're looking for and how you think you can participate will be important, and not go to someone who's networking or even into an interview and said, I want to be on a board. I can do anything you want me to do. Just, let me in, we'll figure it out. I can do it all. So I think being really clear about what you can offer is really important versus, now you may have broader skills and you may actually qualify for a lot more, but I think in this way of people looking, you need to be very crisp, and you shouldn't be so open-ended that you're not giving individuals an opportunity to really understand when that opportunity comes along where you really might be a good fit.
Perfect. Thank you. How about you, Allie? What would be that one thing not to do?
I would pick up on your ending words there, which is all boards aren't the same. I think Don said, well, different industries, they're different maturities, they're different stages, they have different existing sort of challenges from a category perspective. I just would encourage my earlier comment, you're not just looking for a board role. It's what's right for you in the development for your next stage, and where's that match. It will be more successful when it's a match and not something that you sort of land.
Thank you. Dawn?
I think there's this fine line balance of being confident and knowing what you bring to the table and where your passion is and where you can really be a value-added board member. So there's that confidence, but I would say it needs to be appropriately applied. So never delude yourself into thinking that you're going to be a great candidate for a board because you're a woman. I know this is women on boards, but think about yourself as being a great candidate because of what you as an individual, as a professional, bring to the table. And you've heard it in so many ways from all the panelists. And I would just strongly encourage all of us to think about things in that way.
Love that, Dawn. As a girl dad, that's one of the things that I tell my daughters. You happen to be a woman, right? You'll be a great surgeon that happens to be a woman, or you're a great ex that happens to be a woman. So I love that. And Sherry, we'll end it off with you. What is that one thing that you would suggest or you would say, don't do?
Well, there are a few things left after Don and Susan and Allie's comments, but the only thing I would say to put a fine point on what they've said is, and it goes to something Allie said, don't forget that the best board opportunity for you is one that you can both contribute to, but also get a lot out of. It should be a mutually beneficial choice as you look at your board opportunities.
Thank you, Sherry. I'm hearing a recurring theme also of a healthy balance of selfish and selfless. As we close out, I want to thank the people that joined us today. And I saw in the chat, they were from as far away as Virginia and New Jersey and Toronto. So we're even representing other countries on Women on Boards 2020 Minneapolis. To put a pinpoint on some of the things that were said, take a look at industry conferences that are out there. They're great opportunities to network. Understand the skills matrix of boards as you think about board service. Understand your elevator pitch and get very specific about what it is that you want. Understand that there's this women's corporate directors. I know within the chat, someone asked if there was sort of a repository of places, if you will. I can tell you there are a number of things out there. If you just Google women on boards, or if you Google boards, whether it be Monarch Collective or Director Prospects, there's a number of repositories out there. And I loved the commentary around the healthy balance of confidence that you need to bring to the table. And unfortunately, in our culture, in the US culture, oftentimes that's acculturated sort of out of women, right? Dare you be called bossy as little children and that sort of thing. And so I simply refer to that as being a leader. I want to thank everyone for joining today. I want to thank our guests for coming in and all of the commentary around how insightful and the contributive value that each of you as esteemed panelists have brought today. Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin, so much for moderating this panel. And I just want to thank all of the panelists. This was incredible. I took a ton of notes. I don't know about all of you, but this was incredibly informative and useful as we all think about our journeys to the corporate board. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you all. Again, this was amazing. And hopefully as audience members, you got to take a lot of notes as well. And you're on your way to figuring out what's next. One more time, let's give it up for Dawn, Susan, Sherry, Allie, and Kevin for the fantastic job of really sharing the information that we wouldn't normally hear about what it takes to get that corporate board seat. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Kristen Kimmel. Kristen is from RBC Wealth Management, our new global sponsor, and we're really excited about the partnership we have initiated with RBC and are looking forward to doing some exciting work together in 2021. As head of advisor recruiting and field marketing, Kristen leads the firm's efforts to invite the best talent in the industry to join the firm's nearly 2,000 strong financial advisor base. In her role, Kristen works closely with the firm's global head of diversity and human resources to cultivate a diverse and inclusive advisor force and elevate the role of women within the wealth management industry. In the community, Kristen is a board member of the Greater Minneapolis Crisis Nursery and the Industry Association SIFMA Foundation Board. It is now my pleasure to welcome our sponsor spotlight speaker, Kristen Kimmel.
Thank you so much, Ursula. I'm so excited to be here. And what an amazing panel. I have to say, Kevin, I love your wrap up with the what would you not do? I took a ton of notes and it was really incredible. So thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to talk about how women have achieved so much over the past generation. We have more education, we have higher salaries, and more economic power than our mothers and our grandmothers before us. And 2020, while incredibly challenging in so many ways, is a remarkable milestone, as Betsy mentioned, that it marks the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote and had historical results this year. But despite all of these gains, women have yet to achieve the parity in the boardroom. As of 2020, we know that 22.6 of the publicly traded companies on the Russell 3000 index have just one board. And I'm so proud to be part of Minnesota to see that we are actually leading in that particular measurement. But now that is a dramatic improvement from the 14% that it was in 2010. And while we need to pause and celebrate that incredible gain, there is far more work that needs to be done. Women on Boards has been a catalyst and a leader in this change. And as a Diamond Global sponsor, RBC Wealth Management is committed in helping this effort. As a leader in diversity, not only in North America, but globally, RBC is committed to improving diversity and inclusion in the company itself, but in all of the communities in which we do business. And we know it cannot be just financial. It has to be deeper. And in order to be considered for a board position, you must first have leadership experience. According to Catalyst in 2019, the proportion of women in senior management roles grew globally to 29%. And again, while that's the highest number ever recorded, it is not close to parity, but it is a start. It's certainly not enough to support and achieve the Women on Board's goal of gender balance. The question in my mind is, what can companies do to promote more women in leadership roles? At RBC Wealth Management, this has been our mission for several years, both at a corporate level and in our client-facing field business. Of our 11 executive committee members, 4 are women. In our field, where branch and complex directors are at our highest levels, we have doubled the number of women in these roles between 2017 and 2019 and grew another 28% in 2020. And again, while these are certainly big steps and are absolutely in the right direction, as I see it, we are only getting started. What can we do? As female leaders, we need to encourage others to join us and to motivate and encourage others to raise their hands and to help instill the confidence so that they can say they are ready. That is why I am so proud of RBC Wealth Management sponsorship of Women on Boards. Through sessions like these and the incredible panel that we just witnessed, we can help talented, capable women get on the path to leadership and have a meaningful and lasting impact in our business and in our communities and in generations ahead. I am so proud to be part of Women on Boards, and thank you, and back to you, Betsy.
Thank you, Kristen. Certainly appreciate your comments and your support and your friendship. And my compliments to the panel as well. What a terrific panel we've had. I wish, unfortunately in the virtual environment, we can't have applause. So we just do silent applause. And I'd just like to point out too that the the importance that everybody was mentioning about why it's important to serve on corporate boards, for women to be on corporate boards. First of all, it's good for business, and companies are more profitable and more productive when they're on boards. And number two, it's about career advancement for women. As you heard from the panel, oftentimes your own CEO will help to, if you will, make introductions so that you can serve on corporate boards. And you can discuss more about that in your director coach sessions this afternoon, because you want to be on boards to be part of the, it's the ultimate achievement of your business career. And women certainly deserve to be on boards. And lastly, there are lots of reasons, but it's about the workplace culture as well. So that when women are on boards, there's a great deal more attention given to how women are treated in the workplace, women of all racial backgrounds, and the various cultural as well as economic and community issues that companies face. Finally, of course, it's just the right thing to do. So I'd like to share with you a couple of closing slides that tell you about what we're going to do for the next 10 years to come. First of all, you know that our initial goal was 20% by the year 2020. Well, we just think 20% is no longer good enough. And that's what Melinda Gates said during our global conversation, that we're pleased with progress so far, but we are nowhere near satisfied, just like Kirsten just said. So we are moving forward to, our focus must now shift to the next great challenge, and that is advancing corporate boards to become gender balanced. And right now you'll see that very few corporate boards nationwide have equal numbers of men and women. That is what we call gender balanced boards, and only 5% of the companies in Minnesota are gender balanced, and the national average of, average is the wrong word, but the national level of nearly 3,000 companies, only 163 are gender balanced. So we certainly have a long way to go. We don't know how long it will take to get there, but our new campaign will advocate to achieve gender balanced boards. And this is an important issue for the health of companies and the economy. So this is why we're focusing on this lofty goal, a hard goal to achieve, but this is our next campaign goal. And our vision defines this goal very clearly, that all public company boards will be gender balanced by women holding half of the corporate board seats, an equal number of men and women as directors, half and half. And that brings us to our new campaign name. Let's do a drum roll first, a silent drum roll. This is our new campaign name, is 50-50 women on boards. Yay, applause, applause, applause. 50-50 women on boards. Here it is, our new name for all we're doing from January 1st onward. And we will you'll meet many of our chairs and co-chairs around the country on this slide. And yes, by golly, there's Ursula and there's Wendy and many of the women who have been so instrumental in our advancement so far. A long way to go. And when I'm looking, there's Wendy and Ursula right there in the middle above women, and Wendy's clapping very silently but beautifully. So our mission won't change. We will continue to educate, collaborate, and advocate to advance more women to corporate boards. And we will continue our most popular educational program, which is called our Get On Board Workshop. And I mentioned that in the chat, that you can be on a waiting list for our Get On Board Workshop, where we train women over just 3 afternoon sessions in 1 week how to position themselves and seek corporate boards. You heard our panelists talk about how you specifically identify and articulate your value-added experience for boards. And so get on the waiting list now and watch for our website to start dates in February. And then lastly, our brand new program called Path to the Boardroom. And this was created by our co-founder, Stephanie Sonnabend, with this concept to help women in their mid-career. We talked a lot today about advanced career women and how to move to their boards, but this is for mid-career women who need to still develop their visibility and their networking. And, you know, maybe for 10 years, you're not ready to serve on a corporate board. But by the time you get into your 50s and early 60s, you will want to have prepared. And I think it was Dawn who said, well, what networks do you have? What background have you developed over these years? And when a woman can't articulate that and doesn't have the networks and doesn't have much visibility, she's not as good for a corporate board as others who do. So this is where mid-career women will learn how to prepare themselves. Lastly, you can sign up for our database for free at our current web address, 2020wob.com, until December 31st. And then gloriously, our URL will change to 5050wob.com. And thank you, Minneapolis, as we forge ahead together for the next 10 years and beyond. Follow us on social media, on these platforms. And a special thank you to Wendy and Ursula and your leadership committee and the director coaches whom you're going to meet shortly. I'm one of them, so look forward to meeting several of you in person. And I'm handing this microphone back to Wendy and Ursula to close out the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. We so appreciate you being here with us today.
Yeah, it's been a great morning. Thank you so much to everybody, Betsy and the panel and Kevin, thank you so much. What an amazing morning we've had so far, especially learning from all of our speakers and watching the great chat that's been happening. We want to move on now to recognize some of our sponsors. Let's see, can we switch the slides? Thank you. We're going to talk about our global sponsors quickly. So we want to thank BNY Mellon, Bank of America, RBC Wealth Management, McKinsey & Company, EY, and of course, Zoom. And then locally, we have two Minneapolis sponsors, SPS Commerce and Triple Tree.
Excellent. In addition, we would also like to thank this year's 2020 Women on Boards Leadership Committee for their fearless support and personal contribution. This year's Minneapolis Leadership Committee is comprised of the following amazing individuals who trusted us when we said, come and play, come and join us. Jill Blyhobde, Maureen Brenner, Sheila Green, Sue Lang, Teresa McFarland, Jill McNamee, Kathy Paper, Molly Rice, and Jill Swyben. We are a small but mighty leadership committee, and we're so pleased with our progress today and what's ahead. And finally, we would like to especially recognize our 6 amazing director coaches who, this is coming up. You do not want to miss it. I'm telling you, get ready for an incredible session. Our director coaches have donated their personal time as well as their expertise and support of conversations around the journey to the boardroom. Our director coaches that will be leading the breakout sessions today include Jeff Sakaguchi, Patty Wagner, Teresa Bazemore, our very own Betsy Berkemer-Crudere, and Stephanie Sonnabend and Mally Jarrow. We are so lucky to have all of them with us today. It's been an absolute honor working so closely with each and every one of you this year. I say this now in hopes of inspiring today's participants. Yes, that's you. Seize the opportunity to expand your knowledge and network in pursuit of the boardroom, because bottom line, diversity is power. And the first step is joining the conversation today. Thank you for being here as we mark a milestone year and celebrate the 10th anniversary of 2020 Women on Boards. In a moment, you may close out of this webinar and click on the second link provided in your invitation and head on over to the breakout rooms for your coaching and networking sessions, which again are sponsored today by RBC Wealth Management. This is a session you will not want to miss, as you will be up close and personal with director coaches who are currently serving on corporate boards and can help you navigate your very own path to take your seat at the table. Enjoy your session. Wendy, thanks again for co-chairing with me this year. Thanks again, everybody. And I wish you an excellent session with your director coaches. Thanks, everyone.